So to give context to this whole conversation, I've been away for the last 3 weeks. I was away in Japan on a trip with some friends, and I found myself feeling very lost the whole time I was there. Not because of like anything going on with the trip, just because I wasn't here doing this, like doing Paint Talk along with everything else I do in a day, just like all my work, whether that be, graphic designer, which is my day job, or writing for stuff, or, namely recording and editing these videos. And this got me thinking about like, why do I feel this way? Like what's up with that? And I guess it got me sort of, to make a long story short here, it got me kind of thinking of identity a good amount, and like how much of I feel my identity is tied to just what I produce, right? And the reason I started thinking about identity is because usually, so this is a weird thing of mine, maybe this is TMI, let me know, but usually like I'm pretty good at knowing myself through kind of like what I like, right? Like I'm very good at seeing like a shirt and being like, is that me or is that not me, right? And like that's just a byproduct, I think, of being like knowing my tastes well, like knowing like kind of what I like, I guess, to put it simply, right? And I noticed that when I was there, when I was looking around at, things as simple or as stupid as a shirt or other things, I was having way more trouble being like, do I like this thing? Is this thing me? Does it remind me of myself? Like, is that like simple things like that really weren't like, really aren't important at all on the surface, of course. Like this is a pretty dumb example to start off this episode, but as much as they're not important, they made me think like, okay, like I have this weird feeling in my gut and I kind of can't make any decisions about this stuff that I'm usually pretty good at. And it got me to think like, maybe I have way too much of my identity tied back to what I produce, and by consequence of it too, what I consume. And after that, I want to go on a limb here and say, and this could be me reflecting myself onto other people a little too much, that I think of a lot of our identities are based, and not a concerning amount, but a great deal on just what we produce, and I want to give an example of this in, I think, a field that a lot more people probably see it, being like work, right? If you ask anybody, what do you do, or, who are you? I think 9 out of 10 people answer right away with their jobs. And if it's not their job, it's like, I'm a student, right? And I think it's interesting because, why? Like that's something so normal to us of just like, oh, they do X, so that's how they introduce themselves. But like, why the job over anything else? Why not what their favorite color? Why not something like that? Like, it's weird to think about, but like, our jobs are things that we largely don't like. Like most people, I consider myself very fortunate, I do love what I do, but like 99% of people have so many complaints about their job. Like they do not like it at all. They hate their boss, they hate their hours, they don't make enough. Like so many people have so much they dislike about their job. And even if they're okay with their job, like as I am, I quite enjoy it. It's not like their favorite thing in their life. Like I can tell you 100%, I enjoy my hobbies more than my job. And I don't think that's a weird thing to say at all. I think the vast majority of people would say that. So like, isn't it weird that we introduce ourselves then by this thing that we largely don't like that much? Like I was thinking about this and I was like, that's really interesting. Like if I was sick, like I actually am a little sick now. I got sick towards the end of my trip. Terrible time to get sick. The worst thing ever. 20-hour flight home. I was completely sick. I'm still sick, which is why I'm a little out of breath right now just from talking. And also, there might be some cuss in this episode, because in between every sentence, I gotta take a 5-minute coughing break. But we're here, and that's what matters. When you're sick, it's something that also presides over a large amount of your life. Like, you can't not know you're sick. But when people ask you what you do, you don't go like, oh, hi, I'm Max, I have a cold. Like, that's not something that happens. You go, you still go for something else because you don't like being sick, even though it's something you do all the time. Right? So like, I don't know why I mentioned that, to be honest. I don't think the being sick thing was a great example here, but I guess that came out for some reason. But like, I think it's an interesting point. Like, it's an interesting thought of why do we introduce ourselves by this thing that we do that we largely don't like that much. And then it got myself thinking about like, even past that, right? Even past the idea of just our jobs and how we define ourselves by what we do. We also define ourselves a great deal by what we consume. Like even me realizing that I'm not going to say I had an identity crisis, but me realizing like I feel a little bit weird about my own sense of self because I was having trouble buying clothing or doing stuff like that that's usually comes easy to me. You know, of course, it's more of an example of me not knowing myself as well, but isn't it interesting still that it's just like my brain jumps to me buying something, like just straight consumption. Even past that, what do we, like, we talk so much about our favorite movies and TV shows and artists. So much of this is oriented about who we are, what we consume, what we produce. And I just think that's really interesting. I think it's an interesting idea that these days our identity is completely tied to this, to our production and consumption, right? And I think, first of all, there is like a way to just completely get away from this whole thing, right? Like there's a way to get out of this train of thought, and that's just to go like, well, it's just what people spend the most time doing, right? Like you go to work, you work all day, of course you're gonna refer to it as that. If you didn't have a job, and let's say you were doing pottery all day, because you just love doing that, you would probably refer to yourself as a potter? Is that what you call somebody who does pottery? A pottist? A potterer? No. Potterier. Nope. A pot. Ooh. Wait. That kind of has like a little, like I'm a pot. No, it doesn't. I thought for a second like that would be like a little like, you know, like no plurals kind of thing. Like I think that's kind of cool, but I don't think the pot is really the move. But, you know, whether you're a pot or not, that aside, like, I do think that that's like a way out of this. And I think there's a way in which, as much as I'm of course not going to accept that because, you know, I need to get my solid time out of this topic that I thought of, I think there is like a case to be made that is like the right answer. Or even if it's not the right answer, it's definitely an answer, right? Like, it's undeniable that even if we don't like our jobs, the reason we refer to ourselves as them is because it's what we do through a large portion of the day. Right? Like I think that's the surface level sort of, not reflection, but surface level answer most people would give. If I were like, let's say I'm at a party, most fun guy there, somebody goes like, hi, I'm Anne, I'm a psychiatrist, and I, being the great conversationalist I am, interrogate her right away and go, why would you refer to yourself as a psychiatrist? That's just your occupation. What else is there about you? You know, I think if Anne didn't walk away, which if she was smart, she probably would, if somebody asked her that question, I think the answer she would probably give is like, well, it's what I do all day. You know, it's the thing I do most. Same reason why when you're in school, you refer to yourself as a student, even though a ton of people hate school, right? It's a good answer. It's an answer that makes sense, but I still don't like it for a couple of reasons. One, because it ends the train of thought, which I never like. I never like when something ends a train of thought. But two, because even past like the idea of us just doing it because it's what we do through a large portion of our day, I physically cannot think of what we would do if we didn't have the job to fall back on when introducing ourselves. Like, I 100% cannot fathom a reality, right, where you, like, what else would you say? If I'm to say, you cannot refer to yourself as what you do in a day. You can't refer to yourself as any sort of occupation. You can't even refer to yourself as something that could be an occupation, right? Like, even referring to yourself as a pottist or a potter or a pot, that's a job, right? You cannot refer to yourself as a job at all. Because even like, let's say if I was thinking through this whole hypothetical I'm giving myself here, I go, okay, I'm not allowed to refer to myself by what I do. So I'll refer to myself by my hobby. I'm a painter. Where does the word painter come from? The job of being a painter. And most of our hobbies do this. Producer, what do you do? What do you call somebody who knits a lot? Textiles? No clue why textiles came to mind. A clothing designer? I don't know. You get the idea though. It's still based on the occupation of that, you know? It's not so much based on just the hobby in itself. It's based off of what would that hobby look like if it became a full-time job. I think many things are like this. So if you couldn't do that at all, if you couldn't refer to yourself as anything that makes an ounce of money, what would you refer to yourself as if you had to do it? I cannot think of an answer. And that is why I think I wanted to discuss this more than anything. Not so much because of, because as I said, there are some simple answers to why this happens. There are answers that if somebody wanted to get out of this conversation, if Anne was at the party and she was like, okay, I am in a conversation with a freak right now, she could get out of that conversation fast. There's a lot of great answers, but they're answers that never actually get you through to the other side of why this still happens, right? On a deep level. Aside from that, I want to talk about like a place where we don't refer to ourselves by our jobs at all, that being social media, right? You guys know from watching these that I am a graphic designer for my day job. However, if I didn't mention it and I don't have it anywhere else on a profile, that's not something that would come up. Like they largely do not like sharing their jobs on social media. I don't know why. I think it's just because like it's not cool. Like it's not cool to be like on your BTS fan account have like data analyst next to your name. People don't think that's cool largely. And that's why social media often is a place where people try and present themselves as this like sort of just cool thing. Like, so many people's Instagram profiles, if you go to it, I think it's so interesting how like there's no genuine identity. It's just them like in photos of them looking great at different places around the world, trying to present this image of I'm a cool person without you knowing anything at all about them. And I think that's interesting. And that's why so many vague words come to mind when you look at people like that. When you look at like this archetype of like, people often refer to it as like Instagram girls, but guys do it a ton too. Like just this archetype of somebody who is running the quintessential Instagram account, right? This sort of vague set of features that we identify it with. They often will find themselves using words like, content creator, influencer, creative director. Sometimes you'll see like words like this that don't, entrepreneurs, like a huge one. And these are all terms that like, yes, they have a meaning, but when you get down to it, like kind of tells you fucking nothing about a guy. What's your job? I'm an influencer. Fucking okay, Jim. Like that means nothing. Like that's so vague. You could be influencing what, influencing who, how are you influencing? Most of these guys don't have influence. No influencer really is influence unless they're like, buy my thing. Now you're gonna buy my thing. That's when they have influence. It's so weird. Like it's so weird that this is a thing, right? This vague term. Like why did we not refer, how come when this kind of archetype of person came out, we said we won't refer to them as artists, we won't refer to them as photographers or anything like that. They are artists, they're putting out a curated set of photos themselves. They're also photographers for taking these photos, but those words don't suffice. We came with the word influencer. And I think that's interesting because we realize that yes, they take these photos, but their identity is not tied to the photos. It's tied to the action of uploading and putting these things out, right? They're what they output. Right? So their identity in itself becomes this set of things of being an influencer. I hope that made sense. I feel like I just did a circular definition there. But I think it's interesting that when we don't have a job, we come up with a vague set of words that describe somebody who is producing something. What we don't really understand. Like we don't know what does an influencer produce? Content? What is content? Like content is anything. When people make TikToks, I think it's so interesting how like, if you make a TikTok of me going like poop or whatever, like some dumb thing that takes me 5 seconds, that's content. If somebody takes 3 hours to produce, or not even 3 hours, 3 days to produce a beautiful song and they make a TikTok to it, that's content. They're both on the same level, right? Because I think when we talk about content, we're not referring to an actual thing. We're referring to the vague action of producing this thing that is not attached to like our own genuine labor. That's what I think. I don't know. Even past that though, let's say people who don't refer to themselves as these things, people who do not refer to themselves as an influencer or content creator, and they exist largely on faceless profiles, right? Still, we're on social media. We're still talking about this. These people often fall into the realm of then defining themselves based on what they consume. And I don't want to say, I feel like what I'm setting up here kind of infers that there's two types of people that define themselves on what they produce or what they consume. That's not what I'm saying at all. I think we're all defined off what we produce and what we consume. But I'm kind of separating these two things, these two social media archetypes, because I think it helps illustrate both examples better, right? I think there's a whole lot of people out there defining themselves off what they consume. So much of like we've seen the stan kind of thing of like, I'm going to make a Charlie XCX account and like has hers the profile picture, Charlie and you are making content around this person. Your identity is still being defined by something you are consuming, being her music. And so many things work like that, right? I feel like, stan accounts are almost a super, like, almost cartoonish form of this. It's so obvious of an example. But even past that, I think there's a whole lot of things where it's more subtle, right? Like fashion influencers. I feel like people would love to refer to fashion influencers as being some of the most unique people out there. They wear the clothes and it's like, wow, this guy's got, like, he just thought of pairing a new pair of shoes with a new pair of jeans, and this guy's insane, right? We love thinking of them like that, and they, a brand always messages them, or like, we value your unique vision, but at the end of the day, what are they doing? They're buying a bunch of things and putting it on to take photos and release. Like, I'm not trying to devalue this at all, by the way. I think fashion influencers are really cool, and I've stolen several outfits from them even, because I can't trust myself. I have no idea where I would start. But the fact remains that this is something that is based off of consumption. Their identity is wholly based off what they consume and how they put it out, right? And I mean, another great example of this, it's almost as cartoonish as the Stan account, is this idea of these like aesthetic accounts. These things are everywhere, and I eat them up for some reason. Like, you know what I'm talking about, the white photo of like, it'll be like man in Berlin, and it'll just have a photo of like some sort of cigarettes, some sort of wired earbud, some sort of old book that nobody's really read. Like one of those books that's like, nobody's actually read this book, but everybody talks about it. Like one of those, right? And they are selling you an aesthetic, right? But what does that aesthetic come from? It comes off of the things that this hypothetical person, this Berlin man, if you will, is consuming. And I think that's really interesting because, once again, I have to ask why. I think even we see this example in a lot of places, like in our own personal lives, like moving away from social media. Because social media, I mean, like, I think it's, like, when it comes to thought, things like this, right? I feel like I have two things about social media where on the one hand, I think it always works really well in these because, like, it sort of is it's a way that, it's a place that oversimplifies social interaction to, oh my God, I'm actually stupid. The light is coming from here, why would the shadow be here? That makes no sense. This ball doesn't really exist now because I got the light wrong. You win some, you lose some, I guess, but, I think social media is great for talking about examples and stuff like this because on the one hand, it is a place where, like, social interaction is boiled down into likes and reposts and, like, aesthetics as we're discussing, like all these dumb things. So it's like, it almost simplifies social interaction enough where you can make a point about it. Whereas, like, if I were to, think about, like, I see a lot of these patterns repeated in my friends, right? Or people I hang around with, like, throughout my life. But, like, it's so much harder to dissect a conversation because conversations aren't one note, Like, multiple things happen in a conversation, and sometimes you leave more confused than you entered, and, that doesn't actually help you understand anything about anything if you try to dissect it the way that you do social media. But I also have this other side where I'm like, all right, social media is not fucking real. Like, none of this matters. This is all like a dumb place where you like posts like pictures for likes that apparently, and companies just bought all their stuff to seem like they have sales. Like, I don't know. I have like mixed feelings about using in these examples. So moving away from it for a second, great side tangent I did there that totally threw me off track. I think, like, even think about how a lot of people I hang out to talk, right? Slang, jokes, things like that. So much of it now comes just directly from social media content, like TikToks, things like that, of like, different jokes they find and they repeat them. And like, it's a huge thing. I think so many of jokes that are commonly repeated, memes, I guess, right? That are repeated just straight come from there. And like, even down to like the little intricacies behind how someone speaks is based then off what they're consuming. What are the memes you consumed yesterday that you saw with your friend, that you sent them in DM, and now you're talking about it in person? That's 100% based off consumption. I know a lot of my friends will pick up like slang even from content creators they watch. Like, I will say I know they use a certain word. I'll talk to them, notice that, and then maybe they'll show me a video of somebody they watched, and I'll notice like, oh wow, this guy talks like you. Like everything, our personalities are totally amalgamations of what we're consuming. And even past that too, like, this is a weird parasocial kind of example of like, oh, people are getting jokes from influencers and stuff. But like even past that, looking at just like, movies, books, my personality is totally subject to whatever TV show I'm watching. Like 100%. When I'm watching a TV show, like I'll notice like I make a joke that's from the show out in public, and people don't know, when I make a joke that like I thought I saw earlier on a Seinfeld episode to my friends, they don't put together like, oh, Seinfeld season 4 episode 13. No, they're like, oh, that's his joke, right? And they put that in with my personality. I tend to notice this because I feel like a fraud when I do it, but I'm sure like I've done it a ton of times too where I haven't even noticed, right? Like I think just massive amounts of our personality are based on what we're consuming and just how it affects us. This pain talk has totally been just about me making this random observation and trying to prove why I think it's a valid observation, right? I do think in that way it has been less productive than the normal pain talk. I also feel that I'm extremely rusty because it's been 3 weeks, but that's a whole other point. That's for 2 reasons. One, because I do feel like I'm a little rusty, but also because I don't have anything past that. Like, I don't know, like I've been kind of thinking about this last 3 weeks while I've been gone about like a lot of, how much of our personalities are defined by this. And I don't know what it means. Like, I don't know. I can guess where it comes from because of like the world we live in. So much of just what we do is based around what we're consuming and what we're producing. You go home, you go to work, you work all day, you produce value for shareholders, which we all love. And then you go home and you get DoorDash on the way home, or not DoorDash on the way home. You get home, you get your DoorDash, you eat your McDonald's, when you watch TV, and then you go to bed. You scroll on TikTok before bed. What did you do in the day? You woke up, you brush your teeth, you produced for 8 hours, and then you consumed for 4 more before knocking out. Like, I guess that's where it comes from, right? Which is sad and dystopian in its own sense, that I feel like that's what so many of us do. I'm lucky that I hang out with friends, but even I wish I could hang out with them more. You know what I mean? Like, I just think that's bad in general. But, like, I know I don't like this, but what is the alternative to that? Like, is there a world where, let's say things get drastically better, we're not producing for 8 hours a day to go home and consume for 4 more, and we're now in like a happy world where we have tons of free time. What are we introducing ourselves? Do I go, hi, I'm Max, I'm an empathetic person? That doesn't make sense. Like, I think the reason why I'm so infatuated with this topic is, one, because I've noticed it myself the last 3 weeks, but also because it's a topic that I feel I'm fundamentally incapable of thinking my way past. Like, with a lot of things, I feel like Pain Talk, and the reason I love doing this with you guys is because whether it's the comments or the video itself, so much of this series is us discussing the world and then trying to almost think our way out of said world, right? Like trying to like think of a different reality, or why is this here? Does it have to be here? Stuff like that, right? And I think the reason I'm so infatuated with this topic is I have no idea what the alternative, what does that mean? What does it mean to not be like that? Like where would my identity come from if it wasn't what I did in a day? And I genuinely cannot think of anything, which is why I'm so interested in the topic. And more specifically, to segue off here, is why I'm interested in your guys' thoughts on this topic. Please comment, what do you think about this? Because I got nothing, guys. I really have no idea where does this take me? What is the conclusion of something like this? I have nothing. No clue. So please, let me know your thoughts in the comments below. This is the painting. Yeah. I'm trying to get some form down. I decided I'm not going to do a series like the last one because I feel that it's too restricted. Like some days I'm going to want to paint something different than this, Some days I do want to practice form more. I want to get better at form, but I decided, the reason I did a wash at the front of this and the first 5 minutes or so of this was probably super wet and messy. That sounded crazy, but the reason I did it like that was because I wanted to get form down in more of a fluid way. Like if you go back to Paint and Talk I mean, as early as 2, 25, 50, 75, I believe 100 too was another sphere, or just any paint talk where I'm like trying to get down a 3D shape. Let me see, I have the 1, 2, 3, 5, paint talk 5, I did the same thing. Like, I do it in such a rigid and robust way, and sometimes, I mean, it does look like a sphere, and that's cool, but other times, like, it just looks... It's soulless by the end of it. So I wanted to try getting it down. I want to try these, where I do it in just kind of a messy way, lay everything down, pull some form out of it. I mean, this is cool. This is good. You know, it's fun. And I want these to just be super interesting and messy and fun in comparison to the last series that was just way too far in that color palette direction. Man, the dark ages of this series are over, guys. I hated the color palette series. Like, I hated that with my whole life. This is the painting, though. Go check it out over the Instagram. It'll be up at the end of the week. And let's see if I can remember this outro. All right, ready? Wait, let me think. Until next time, guys, gals, and pals, my name is Max Seiss. This is Paint Talk, episode 234. I'm here every morning, painting and talking with you all. Was that it? Like, it feels like that was it. Oh, man, God, I got paint all over my new jeans.